I'm not here to be negative or mean, but how about we fix some of the issues with the messy live-action adaptation of Mulan and its truly baffling creative decisions? Yeah, a lot of these decisions revolve around how Disney handled the legacy of one of their own beloved titles, but there's plenty more to dissect. So I'm going to dive into both broad and specific issues I had with the movie, explain what the filmmakers claimed they were going for, discredit that, and explain how these issues could have been fixed. Whether that be in simple reshoots, post-production and editing choices, or even from conception. Because honestly, minor reshoots, like literally a week's worth, and editing alterations could have made this universally embraced. Simple rewrites or additional material would have gone a long way. Before I get into it, I have to get into the controversy of the film disregarding the iconic elements of the original movie because I have a lot to say. But stick around because that's not where it ends. Look, I want these live-action adaptations to be different experiences from the animated counterparts, but I want them to be different by building on what has already been established rather than ignoring it. Expand upon it, explore it, add complex alternatives to the elements that were simple, bring in new characters, new sequences, new music, let modern storytelling bring an exciting grand freshness to it all. But do all of this new stuff at the very least by branching off the core elements of the animated versions. Because the majority of the audience going to see these movies is to have an amusement park-like experience of seeing their favorite characters and stories come to life and celebrated in the biggest way possible. I don't think any of these movies have absolutely got the nail on the head, but most have come incredibly close to perfecting what these should be. Aladdin, for example, gave you everything you loved from the original, but presented it with its own cinematic voice, its own charms, its own additions, its own nuances. So the experience was undeniably Disney's Aladdin, brought to life, but with an identity of its own that didn't erase or contradict the DNA of the property. Though Beauty and the Beast had its faults in execution, it was still an enchanting movie that completely embraced and celebrated the original, while at least trying to be a more sophisticated, detailed, and complex alternative, if only on the surface. Even Dumbo, which was awful, was admirable in its template of retelling the extremely simple and short original story in the first act, and then using the rest of the runtime to tell a new story. On the other end of the spectrum, I thought The Lion King was straight up plagiarism. It was exactly the same as the original, but hollowed out, stripped of its artistry, emotion, and charm. There was potential to explore new territory, but it was the same, but photorealistic and bland, and that's just not how these films should be. But as someone who grew up with Mulan as their favorite movie, it's just a hard pill to swallow to have a movie titled Disney's Mulan, but for it to disregard the iconic staples of that title. Especially when you've imagined how they would look in the real world. The potential is huge. You're making Disney's definitive live-action version of Mulan, so yeah, adjust to the new medium in whatever way necessary, but there's an expectation and responsibility when handling Mulan under the Disney banner. And if Nicky Caro and company don't want to acknowledge that, then they can take their vision to Warner Brothers. I get that they want to be more serious and follow the historical ballad and respect Chinese culture, but you can still do all of that while utilizing the elements of the animation and adjusting them to fit the new standards instead of just scrapping them. You can start from scratch for a completely new vision of Mulan, but why not take that to a different movie studio and let Disney embrace the legacy they established? The filmmakers are like, why are you all so upset at us for leaving out your favorite songs and characters when the movie is completely different, so don't even associate it with the animated movie. It's different. It's different. It's different. So stop the comparisons and expectations. They know the majority of their audience is only watching because they love the original and want to see how that translates to a real-life flesh and blood world. That's literally the only reason the live-action movies make $1 billion each. So to not even do the bare minimum feels like a slap in the face to those of us who adore the original and want to see it celebrated in a grand new way. The way they pick and choose what from the animated movie stays and what goes is baffling to say the least. We won't have Mushu, cri-kee, or Grandma, and we'll only have alternatives for Li Shang and Shan Yu, but we gotta keep these three who are so integral to the DNA of Disney's Mulan and are the forefront of the merchandising. We won't have the pivotal character-defining reflection moment, but we gotta have the skinny dipping scene. We're not even going to have an instrumental or musical cue regarding Make a Man Out of You, one of the main aspects associated with Mulan. But Christina Aguilera is the most essential part of its DNA, and it would be sacrilegious to not bring her back to provide her white girl power to the soundtrack. It doesn't sit right to have some elements acknowledged, but the most essential ones completely ignored. If its goal was to strip the animated movie of its iconic elements in favor of doing something more grounded, okay, whatever, I can live with that. Even though all those elements still could be present but more grounded and serious themselves, whatever, cool. But it's not grounded. There are way more supernatural elements in this movie than in the original, and they're ridiculous. Dragons and singing aren't realistic, but let's have a shape-shifting witch and let's give our lead actual superpowers. Which leads me to the specifics. I'm going to begin by covering the movie's infamous reputation for the absence of the OG's iconography like mushu, the songs, etc., and how the situation should have been handled in the first place, and how it could have been fixed even after the movie finished wrapping. First and foremost, mushu. Should have been in it, could have been in it. This is unequivocally the movie's biggest sin. He is so integral to the identity of the title that is Disney's Mulan, more so than anything else. Before the pandemic, when the film was supposed to hit theaters, there were Mulan merchandise displays at stores to promote the new movie, and they were all primarily filled with mushu merch. Because he's an essential part of the property, and I'm actually shocked Disney didn't force him into the new film, considering he was helping promote it, and especially after the aggressive backlash online when people heard he wasn't going to be in it. People lost interest, and you'd think Disney would want to squeeze him in to get as much coin as they can. I mean, they spent $200 million on the damn movie. Producer Jason Reed even said that the main thing he learned from when test audiences screened early cuts of the film was that they loved mushu and were perplexed as to why he wasn't present. Why didn't Disney listen? These movies are for the people. Well, the filmmakers claim that they excluded him because a comedic talking dragon doesn't fit the serious tone that they were going for, and Chinese audiences didn't like him. First of all, you can totally adjust the character to a more serious tone, and he doesn't even have to talk. In the live-action Cinderella, which also abandoned singing and talking animals for a grounded feel but worked, they included Gus Gus, and he didn't talk and he was barely in it, but his presence within the more realistic world was enough to leave me satisfied, and had he not been in the movie, I would have rioted the streets. Mushu's presence could have created a cool Chinese version of Game of Thrones vibe, and seeing that character translated to a photorealistic world would be so incredibly awesome. So how could this be fixed? Easy. Replace the phoenix with a dragon. Simply imply the dragon is mushu. Simple thing that could have even been done in post-production. That would mean that his screen time would be limited, but it would work for this approach to the material, and his presence in this universe would relieve the frustrations of audiences drastically. I can't imagine anyone really being strongly attached to the whole Phoenix scenario other than the director and filmmakers, who think it symbolizes something a lot deeper than what its brief screen time actually allows. Like, the screen time is very brief, so a little digital alteration would only do good and not affect much with the story or themes, but would make a massive impact for fans. And having mushu be present in this context would still make things very, very far from being a carbon copy of the original, while still not abandoning one of the essential elements of it. Even if the filmmakers thought the presence of the phoenix was essential because of the whole female power aspect, they still could have had the phoenix and mushu. I thought it would be really interesting if along her journey, Mulan believed the dragon was her guardian, but in the end she realized it was the phoenix the entire time. Because the phoenix is female and Mulan's embracing what she brings to the table as a woman. Maybe Mushu had been Mulan's father's guardian when he went to war, so she thinks he's her guardian as well, not knowing she has her own. This could be accomplished by minor reshoots or additional scenes. Even just a cameo would be better than nothing. Have an additional scene of Mulan on her way to training camp, and in the forest she sees a little dragon following her and says something like, "My ancestors sent a little lizard to be my guardian." But eventually the phoenix flies overhead and she realizes that that's her true guardian, and she's instilled with hope. I mean, there are so many different ways to effectively fit the character into the movie through a little bit of reshooting. I mean, they did reshoots anyways. But let's be honest, the character should have been an integral part of the film from the script stage. He's Mulan's sidekick, and he should be there with her through her journey. And there's so many different ways to portray him. Big, small, unable to talk, able to talk. Say what you want, but in a movie where there's a shape-shifting witch turning into 1,000 eagles, a talking dragon isn't a stretch. And it doesn't even have to sound like Eddie Murphy and constantly crack jokes. Excluding him entirely, though, is blasphemy. Since the script for the movie actually began as a non-Disney script that Disney bought, I just don't think they were creative enough to figure out how to retool it into their own. I don't know why I have this epic visual of Mulan in a dress and armor, riding into the palace at night in a rainstorm with a large, deep crimson mushu flying overhead. I don't know, but I'd love to see it. If there's a sequel, mushu must be there. The next most controversial aspect of this movie. Despite the original having one of the best Disney soundtracks of all time, this movie doesn't contain any songs. There are brief instrumental musical cues to Honor to Us All and Reflection, and some lyrics are incorporated into moments of dialogue that are admittedly cringy, but damn. Unlike Aladdin, Beauty and the Beast, and partially The Jungle Book, they wanted to go into a non-musical direction, which I can live with, because one of my favorite live-action adaptations, Cinderella, wasn't a musical either. And the only nods to the original songs were in the end credits, even though they were singing in the movie. Seriously though, the Lavender's Blue song couldn't have been replaced with A Dream is a Wish Your Heart Makes. So Mulan makes a bit more effort in acknowledging the music than Cinderella did, but Mulan is also much different than its counterpart than Cinderella is to its own, so with Mulan we're craving as much iconography as we can get for the slight chance of feeling nostalgic and getting a slice of much needed serotonin. Mulan's solution seems fairly straightforward and something that could have been done completely in post-production. Just play full-on instrumentals over the appropriate scenes. I was pleased with the little lick of Bring Honor to Us All that they played when Mulan was getting ready for the matchmaker, and thought instrumentals for the other songs would play later on. But when the training montage didn't even have a hint of what was perhaps the most beloved song of the OG movie, I'll Make a Man Out of You, I was shocked and baffled because it was perfectly set up. Soldiers were training and struggling and eventually succeeding, and music was playing, but it wasn't Make a Man Out of You, and it was just puzzling. Also, there was no instrumental for Girl Worth Fighting For, which could have been played or at least hinted at in the scene where they were talking about women. That song is less essential, so it's fine. Alright, you little... The composer for the original Mulan, Matthew Wilder, was actually brought on to explore how to incorporate the music into the final product. And apparently, director Nikki Caro had no idea what she wanted, and despite having been hired to create a Disney Mulan movie, didn't want to acknowledge Disney's Mulan, wanted to make something entirely her own. That's not how IPs work, and that's not how Disney works. So Matthew Wilder had a bunch of different ideas. He had various orchestrals of the original music, he had written new versions of the songs to be sung over the appropriate moments, and recorded an all-female version of Make a Man Out of You, calling it badass. But the filmmakers rejected them, and settled for weaving parts of only 2 of the songs into the score. If they didn't work, they didn't work. But I can't imagine there not being a better path than the path they took. In all honesty, it could have worked as a musical, and to claim that it couldn't is to have no imagination or creativity. Oh, we can't have a serious war musical. Les Mis. Les Mis. Once again, this is a movie with a shape-shifting witch. People catching arrows with their bare hands, defying gravity, running up walls, fighting sequences. You think singing is going to kill the realism? This movie is certainly serious in its approach, but it's not necessarily dark. Just have more grand, epic, dramatic arrangements of the songs and you'd bring such an intriguing new quality to the movie. If Jungle Book can figure out how to incorporate the music, the Mulan filmmakers definitely were capable. And you never realize how important the songs were for storytelling and character development until they were gone, and the new movie is lacking on both storytelling and character, so... Next! The next big controversial change is that there is no bi-icon Li Shang, for he is split into 2 characters because supposedly the filmmakers didn't want Mulan's love interest to be her boss, which, okay, whatever, that makes sense, but by the end, Mulan essentially becomes his boss. And he sees her as more powerful and brave than himself. And it's not like he's ever taking advantage of her or manipulating her. But whatever. They could have just used additional dialogue replacement to change Chen Hongwei's name to Li Sheng and called it a day. Next. Cri-kee. Okay, they actually sort of make this character human and call him Cricket, but he is not needed, and all it does is make it harder to distinguish between the other soldier friends and take screen time away from them. And like, turning a bug into a human. Nobody wanted that. I didn't expect cri-kee to go on the journey with Mulan this time around, and he definitely isn't as essential as Mushu, but he is still a defining character of the animated film, and it would have been nice to have him there. I don't see why that spider that causes all the trouble in the matchmaker scene couldn't have been a cricket. Mulan could have had a lucky cricket at home and left it with her family when she left for war to bring them luck while she's gone. Or maybe she could have brought it to the war for good luck. I mean, cri-kee erasure is not cute. It's not the biggest deal, but it would have been nice to have him. Next, Grandma. One of the unsung heroes of the animated movie. She's an absolute legend and has some of the best, most memorable lines in the entire film. She's completely gone from the new film, and in her place is Mulan's sister. And I don't mind Mulan having a sister, but she is completely unnecessary and adds no value to the film. Why couldn't we have Grandma and a sister? If we only got to have one, I'm sure most people would choose Grandma. They totally could have done additional photography to show there was a Grandma. She didn't even have to live with the family. Next, Shan Yu is not Shan Yu, but Bori Khan. And the Huns are not the Huns, but the Rorons. I just don't know the reason, but it's such a random choice that it's frustrating. Okay, moving on. Now, when it comes to Mulan storytelling, the original Mulan has specific pivotal moments that are vital to making it what it is, and making it as powerful and effective as it is. Not even half of these basic core elements are there. There are 6 essential points of the original Mulan film, and in a definitive live-action adaptation, these elements should not go ignored, if you are to acknowledge the original in any way. They can be executed in a new, exciting way, and the scenes leading up to them can be completely different, but they are the foundation of the identity that is Disney's Mulan. Okay, here they are. The reflection scene. The haircut. I'll make a man out of you montage. The avalanche. The you have saved us all moment. And the greatest gift and honor is having you for a daughter scene. Now, let me break these down one by one on how the live-action movie handles these core aspects of the film, if it even does. So first off, reflection. In the animated movie, the scene in which Mulan, after dishonoring her family in a disastrous meeting with the matchmaker, walks around her garden and into a temple while singing Reflection, is not just a powerful music moment, but is the most important moment for her character. It establishes that she doesn't know her place in the world. She's struggling with her identity. She doesn't know her value. She isn't comfortable with her predetermined role in society. The live-action movie isn't a musical, so she's not going to sing. But how do the filmmakers present an alternative to this crucial and iconic moment? They don't. They skip it right over without even blinking. Not even so much as a split second of Mulan looking in a puddle at her reflection, or walking off into the garden, or the temple, or the field to reflect. And not only is it just a slap in the face to the original to ignore this scene, but it isn't beneficial for the new movie on its own terms either, because we barely get to know this new Mulan, or what she wants, or how she feels about life, or anything. It's like the filmmakers assume that we all watched the original and should know about Mulan's battle with herself, which is ironic because with the way this movie is presented, it's like they don't want to acknowledge the original at all. I know the instrumental for Reflection finds its way into the musical score a couple of times throughout the movie and shows Mulan embracing her chi while it plays, but the whole point is to establish the character before she decides to join the war. So, what they should have done. Assuming they already shot the movie in this scenario, they'd need to go back and shoot an additional scene or moment of Homegirl running off maybe outside her village or by a serene pond or something where she looks at her reflection and has a moment while the instrumental plays. Going into a temple would also be nice. I'd love if she got her horse, rode away and had a moment to herself, maybe talked or whispered to herself about how she'll never bring honor to the family. Her sister or mother or father could come and talk to her, and they go back to the village, and then they get the Emperor's message. If this was a musical, it would be a perfect opportunity to utilize the deleted reflection sequence, which you can watch on YouTube from the original. Moving on, the haircut scene, aka Mulan's decision. People love to go on about how epic the live-action adaptation is. You want epic? This is epic. Mulan is sitting in the moody rain, heartbroken, reflecting, thinking. She makes a decision. The most awesome, intense music you've ever heard starts playing. She prays to her ancestors, leaves her comb by her sleeping family, cuts her hair with a freaking sword, the most iconic manner, puts on her father's armor, rides off into the night. Absolute chills. Absolute compelling cinema that displays the power of animation. Now, how does the live-action adaptation up the ante? They cut to a Mulan in her armor and sword, and then she's gone. Ew. I don't know what this movie's fascination is with skimming over the most important moments, but damn, this scene just doesn't hit. I don't know if it was originally longer or what, but it goes by in the blink of an eye, and it needed to feel epic. It needed to feel more crucial. It needed that grandeur, that gravitas. This is the ultimate decision. We need to feel it. And slashing out the iconic haircut moment is pure treason. The filmmakers say it's because male soldiers kept their hair long, but come on. We can suspend disbelief for 1 second for pure cinematic euphoria in a film where witches turn into birds. And everyone is speaking English. Fix it! Next, I'll Make a Man Out of You montage. One of the most, if not the most beloved songs, an awesome montage displaying failure and character growth, absolutely essential and beyond iconic. The new film has a similar montage, but the music is MIA, and Mulan's growth isn't as compelling because she isn't a random girl with no skill or experience working to become a great warrior. She's naturally a great leader who is just hiding it because she was told to. Add the music instrumental into post-production and I can forgive the blasphemy. Next, the avalanche scene, aka the battle. Right. This is a landmark epic moment in the OG movie. The shot of the Huns on the snowy mountaintop is grand, more epic than anything in this supposedly more epic live-action movie. This is a major moment. This is a battle. This is where Mulan utilizes her personal skill set to outsmart everyone, and then the avalanche and the aftermath. It's the big set piece of the film. I am glad the live-action movie decided to recreate this scene, and it is enjoyable in its own right, but in a far lesser fashion. Let's just start off by saying how the battlefield is bland as hell and has no cinematic value. It just doesn't feel big or grand at all. The scene would be awesome if everything was covered in snow, and even more so if there was fluffy snowfall falling down throughout the entire sequence. That would make it so much more visually interesting. So I think visually is where this scene really needed to be touched up. More men, bigger scale. I think the rest is pretty okay and a decent alternative to the original sequence. The avalanche could have been prolonged, more intense, and less murky, and the editing is a little too much. It all just doesn't have the same impact. Next, the "you have saved us all" moment. Pure chills. Every time. This is the defining moment of the movie, and the setup of the whole fireworks-saturated festival throughout the climax works so much better than daylit, visually flat construction site of the live action. Once again, no cinematic value. Anyway, Mulan is on the grand steps to the palace, having just saved all of China in an explosive finale. The emperor approaches her. Even though she without hesitation saved all of China, she feels as if she has once again brought dishonor to everyone. But the emperor tells her that she saved everyone and the entire city bows to her. The chills! She finally sees her value. In the live action, it's just kind of a half-assed version of that. They're in the palace, the emperor is kind of like, "You're awesome, Mulan," and whatever. Once again, this is supposed to be the more epic version, but is far less so than the animation. This particular scene is fine, thanks to reflection playing in the background and OG Mulan cameo, but I think they should have reshot the entire climax, TBH, or at least most of it. For some reason, having it in broad daylight just isn't as impactful or dangerous or exciting. Maybe have it at sunset or twilight or breaking dawn or new moon or eclipse. Seriously though, there's once again no cinematic value in the finale. You want epic? Okay. How about a nighttime rooftop fight with the villain in the pouring rain and thunderstorm? What if the northern invaders shot a fiery cannon and knocked off part of the rooftop, leaving Mulan and discount brand Shan Yu to fight in the palace with no roof to protect them from the intense rain and parts of the palace around them on fire? If Mushu were in this movie, this would also be the time where he discovers he can breathe fire and goes to town. Mulan finds the fireworks for the Imperial City's festivals and sets them off, killing discount Shan Yu. The Emperor sees Mulan alone in the palace room, getting rained on from the demolished roof, and he sees rubble everywhere. He kind of goes off on a tangent like in the OG movie about her impersonating a man, destroying the palace, etc., etc., and then saving them all. He bows to her, and I think this would be a very beautiful, intimate alternative to what happens in the OG. And the Emperor eventually takes Mulan in front of everyone, and they all bow, and so on. Next, the greatest gift and honor is having you for a daughter moment. Another moment that gives me intense chills and makes me emotional as hell. It's a beautiful moment where Mulan returns and sees her father for the first time, worried that she has dishonored him, but then he lets her know that the biggest honor of all is that she is his daughter. In the live-action movie, they have a similar alternative, but it's not intimate. It's in front of the whole town, and it doesn't hit nearly as hard because neither character is defined enough to be as emotionally invested in their weakly established dynamic. So the fix? Well, giving Mulan her reflection moment would be a start. Reshooting the scene where she arrives home, but her father isn't there, so she goes into the garden and finds him there, and they share a beautiful moment. That would be swell. Oh, and I think it would be beautiful if the movie ended in a sort of classic Disney way, because the very ending is something that kind of bothered me about the OG. Have it end on a wide shot of Mulan and her father sitting together in the garden while slowly pulling back and playing an orchestral version of Reflection. Okay, so moving on to some final issues to be fixed. I mentioned this, but the idea that Mulan is some gifted warrior superhero from the very beginning takes away from the emotional impact and stakes of the story. The original Mulan didn't think she had any special skills and struggled with her self-worth, but with no combat experience, she sacrificed her life to save her father, and that was her true gift, her selflessness. Her love for her family, and her willingness to throw herself into a situation where she doesn't have experience or abilities to have a likelihood of survival. Whereas 2020 Mulan has much less. Also, I surprisingly liked the witch character, and wish she wasn't so underutilized like Bori Khan, who really should be named Shan Yu for my OCD purposes. He's just kind of not intimidating or threatening, and I feel like we needed an extra scene of his brutal relentlessness. And like I said before, this film really doesn't feel as epic as many claim it to be. It's serious, there's war action, and some of the locations and cinematography are nice, but not much truly screams epic. Its budget was bigger than Beauty and the Beast, and that movie looks way more expensive. Mulan even looks a little bit less grand than Cinderella, and that was half of this movie's budget. And even if the budget was tiny, there are factors in creating atmosphere and mood to make this thing still seem more epic, and it just doesn't do any of that. I don't think the visuals were as stunning as people made them out to be either, at least compared to how far they could have gone with the budget they had. Yeah, there were some beautiful scenery shots and the red colors popped, and I do really like the lighting in the indoor scenes towards the beginning, but it definitely isn't the epic Disney war fantasy that I imagined. This just may be my taste, but I would have been swept away by a Chinese garden in the spring, surrounded by cherry blossom trees and their falling petals, gorgeous mountains in the pastel mist, feathery snowfall in the night accompanied by a golden glow of light. I also would have liked if we would have gotten to know the soldiers more so we could actually distinguish them and know their personalities. Maybe if the editing wasn't so rapid, we would be able to absorb them more. But from what I saw, the depiction of Po was super gross, forced, and aggressive, while the animated character was super zen and calm. Yao was also irritating and not in a good way. And I think I mentioned the emotional beats just don't land and are rushed and all surface level. So yeah, I think the two easy fixes would have been to replace the Phoenix with Mushu and to have the instrumentals of the OG songs playing over the appropriate moments. Also a reflection scene. But there is so much that could have been done with this movie, and the direction they went was confusing and frustrating.